This is my absolute favorite time of the year because this is usually the part where you see a lot of star players moving to new teams. In the past, we made videos like this before, and there's been times where we've gotten our predictions spot on, and then there's been other times where we've taken huge misses. So before we get to the content, we are giving away a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel $500. We're doing the same exact giveaway for someone that follows us on Instagram. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Let's start with by far the most obvious player that is set to get traded, and I really hope this is the last time we include him in my videos because we've mentioned this man for the past year and he's starting to make me look bad, and that's none other than Deshaun Watson. Now, obviously, Deshaun Watson is a very special case because in order for someone to successfully trade for Deshaun Watson, people are waiting for him to figure out his legal situation. Now, currently, the prediction is that Deshaun Watson will 100% be finished with all of these civil cases, and hopefully the stuff that he is being charged with is not true, because if it is true, that would be absolutely horrible. But his lawyer, Rusty Hardin, is predicting that this should all end by April 1st. Now, we don't know what's going to happen after that. For all you know, this guy could go to prison. For all you know, he could get kicked out of the league. It could be another Michael Vick 2.0 type of situation. That is unclear, but assuming that he gets a positive result from all of this, then you can imagine that he will get traded this offseason. The market for him at this point is very strange. It has been a market that has been consistently changing over the past couple of years, starting all the way back with a year ago where many of us thought he was going to join the Miami Dolphins. There was a point where we thought he was going to join the San Francisco 49ers. There has been so many photoshops of Deshaun Watson on various teams, and the most recent information that I have for you on him comes to us from Dove Kleinman, who says that the Dolphins will not be trading for Texans QB Deshaun Watson. Officially, the door is closed according to general manager Chris Greer. Now imagine if the Dolphins just said that the door is shut on Deshaun Watson. We're not trading for him at any point last season, instead of keeping the door wide open and alienating their franchise QB Tua Tagovailoa. Ultimately, if things work out for him off the field and putting all that stuff to the side, if a team is able to trade for him and he's able to return to football next year, then this is a bona fide franchise QB. This is a man that has put up prolific statistics. Of course, he had Brandon Cooks and he had pretty decent wide receivers, but despite the Houston Texans essentially trying to rebuild during his last season with the team. I mean, they traded DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, for crying out loud. None of the moves they did made sense, and still Deshaun Watson put up over 4,800 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions to go along with 444 rushing yards and 3 rushing TDs. So now that we got that obvious stuff out of the way, let's get to the next quarterback that is obviously going to get traded in this offseason, and that's none other than Jimmy Garoppolo. After a tremendous run over this past year, obviously with some ups and downs, where Jimmy Garoppolo looked good at some points and looked terrible in others, I think he's played himself to a point where he could get traded for a second round draft pick, and honestly, if a third round draft pick would still be a W in the San Francisco 49ers book. This is seen as a foregone conclusion. The San Francisco 49ers drafted Trey Lance. They have been saying nothing but good things about Trey Lance. John Lynch recently came out and said that Trey Lance is everything that they were hoping for when they traded up for him to select him, and I honestly love the way they're bringing him along, using Jimmy Garoppolo in the Alex Smith role and treating Trey Lance like he's the next coming of Patrick Mahomes. Now, is it going to yield a similar result? Well, I'm very unsure, but you have to admit this kid is set up for success. 1 year to learn the Kyle Shanahan offense, 1 year to watch a consummate professional Jimmy Garoppolo, who also learned from Tom Brady how to be a consummate professional himself, alongside a great running game, a great offensive line, and remarkable weapons like George Kittle and our favorite wide back Deebo Samuel. And I think things are going to look good for Trey Lance, and there's no way, shape, or form that the San Francisco 49ers don't move on to Trey Lance this offseason. As a result, you might be thinking,
okay, so what is the market like Jimmy Garoppolo looking like?
point? Well, I think a lot of this depends on how free agency shakes out and possibly how the NFL draft combine shakes out. Some teams may be looking at Malik Willis and saying, wow, I think Malik Willis could be the next big developmental QB, but needless to say, I think a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers could be interested in him. The Washington Commanders are trying to take a big swing at QB, although I don't really look at Jimmy G as a big swing. He's still a great bridge quarterback, especially if you're trying to develop a QB for the future. Our next quarterback on this list that is potentially going to get traded is Carson Wentz. And this comes at the cusp of some very interesting comments at the hands of the Indianapolis Colts over this past year. More recently, Colts general manager Chris Ballard said on Carson Wentz that Mr. Irsay, Frank Reich, and I will sit down over the next few weeks and figure it out. Ultimately, Carson Wentz's value has been plummeting over the past couple years after a down year with the Philadelphia Eagles 2 years ago, and a divorce that resulted in its head coach Doug Peterson getting fired as well, and then ultimately getting traded to the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of us were thinking that the reason why Carson Wentz was so successful initially was because of the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Frank Reich, was the offensive coordinator for Carson Wentz during those near MVP seasons in 2017. And ultimately, it seemed like that wasn't necessarily the case. The Indianapolis Colts have been in quarterback purgatory ever since Andrew Luck has left. And the thing is, if you look at Carson Wentz's basic statistics, they don't necessarily tell the tale of the tape because his statistics look pretty good. 27 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, 62% completion percentage, over 3,500 yards passing. So what's the problem? The issue is Carson Wentz has this tendency of playing absolute hero ball in the wrong situations, throwing it into triple coverage when he could just check the ball down and get an easy first down. And that's been a recurring theme over and over again. Many people are saying that is the primary reason why the Indianapolis Colts were not able to beat the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars to get a playoff berth this past year. Ultimately, I feel like Carson Wentz is going to be a consolation prize for some other team. There's no way the Colts will get a first-round pick in return for him. I'm looking at the Washington Commanders to potentially trade for him, or even the Indianapolis Colts to straight up release him. Now, speaking about the NFC East, let's get a little funky over here. The other day, we made a video on Amari Cooper getting released. Now, in my opinion, I think it's a foregone conclusion that the man gets released. There's no way a team is going to trade for him with the contract that he has, especially when there is the report that the Dallas Cowboys are likely to release him, and you could just go into free agency and sign him outright. With that being said, Ian Rappaport still said that there is a possibility that the Dallas Cowboys trade him, although in my opinion, I think it's a very small possibility, like a 10% possibility. It's still a possibility at that. The reason for this is the Cowboys claim that Amari Cooper hasn't been as productive as he first was when the Cowboys went out and traded for him, but the real reason is because they overpaid Ezekiel Elliott. They have $9 million in dead money already, so they need to cut Amari Cooper, who will take $22 million off of their cap hit and is $6 million in dead money for a net positive of $16 million, which will take the Dallas Cowboys from $13 million over the cap to $3 million under the cap. Yeah, not the most ideal situation, but that's what happens when you do business with your heart and not your brain. They ended up paying Ezekiel Elliott that exorbitant contract for him to have a 4 yards per carry rushing average. You made your bed, now you gotta sleep in it. Another wide receiver that could potentially get traded is none other than Jarvis Juice Landry, who recently came and said that he would love to continue with the Cleveland Browns, but he wants to win a championship, and it would be great for him to do that in Cleveland, but he kind of made it seem like,
hey, I don't mind if I get traded out of here, but I don't mind staying as well.
Needless to say, the Cleveland Browns could save up to $14 million in the salary cap if they traded Jarvis Juice Landry. It's very unfortunate because Jarvis Landry was one of the few individuals that believed in the Cleveland Browns when they initially traded for him. He gave that famous impassioned speech on Hard Knocks where he demanded that his teammates turn the Cleveland Browns into a winning culture and environment. And to be honest, he kind of succeeded. Whoever gets Jarvis Landry at the end of the day, at the very worst, is going to get a tremendous locker room guy. And that brings us to our final definite player that I think is going to get traded. There's a whole other tier that I'm going to call the long shots, but I'm going to include that as well. The final individual that is potentially going to get traded is Calvin Ridley. Now, Calvin Ridley was a very interesting situation over this past year. He's been a tremendous wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, but ultimately he needed to take some time time off over this past year to take care of his mental health, which, to the Atlanta Falcons' credit, they honored, and as a result, he's only played in 5 games this past year. It's assumed that the Atlanta Falcons are going to work with him to try to trade him to a team of his liking, but needless to say, man, you could easily get yourself one of the better route runners in the NFL who had a 1,374 receiving yard season the last time he played in a complete season in 2020, with Julio Jones on his side as well, for what I'm assuming to be a second or a third round pick. Well worth it. He's just entering his prime right now at the age of 27, so it's something that is very interesting to take a look at. Now it's time to get to the long shots, ladies and gentlemen. The very first long shot is an individual that I have to include on this list just for legitimacy reasons. That's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, we've been covering extensively on this channel recently, where he's been yo-yoing with the media, saying that he hasn't made a decision on his future yet. The man could either retire, could return to the Green Bay Packers, or ultimately the man can come out and demand a trade to what I predicted was going to be the Denver Broncos, maybe the Indianapolis Colts, maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers. You never know with Aaron Rodgers, but still, it is a possibility. I wanted to include him just in case because he is a long shot. Another individual is Russell Wilson. Most recently, Russell Wilson came out and said that he is committed to the Seattle Seahawks. However, we're unsure of how sincere his commitment is. There has been tension between him and Pete Carroll in years past, and it's going to be interesting to monitor that situation moving forward. Most recently, the Washington Commanders reached out to the Seattle Seahawks about a potential Russell Wilson trade. The talks didn't really get that much momentum, and as a result, at the time that we're making this video, Russell Wilson is still a Seahawk. Still very interesting to see what happens moving forward. If you offer the Seahawks an offer that they can't refuse, I wouldn't be surprised to see them move on from Russell Wilson. Finally, an individual that has just been very strangely involved in trade discussions recently is none other than Sir Saquon Barkley. Now, according to Jordan Schultz, he spoke with 2 teams, both of whom told him that the Giants' potential asking price for Saquon Barkley was very significant. One assistant GM also said that he doesn't get the sense that they actually want to trade him. To me, this is just posturing, but Joe Schoen would want a first-round pick. Now, here's the problem with that. It's one of those situations where you clearly are overvaluing a player that you currently have. Saquon is a tremendous talent, and there were reports a few days ago that the Giants would happily trade Saquon Barkley if they got the right offer for him, because he is going to have to get paid soon, and the question about how much he deserves to be paid is a completely different conversation. But of course, it's rumored that the consensus trade value for Saquon is a 4th-round pick, probably because of his injury history, probably because people are valuing running backs the way that they once did. And most recently, there was a report that came out and said that the New York Giants are more likely to trade James Bradbury than Saquon Barkley, according to Ian Rappaport. And that wraps up our report of the most likely players to be traded over the next month or so. Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to enter for a chance to win $500, or follow us on Instagram for a chance to win $500. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.